The grand rotunda of the High Synod did not merely exist. It presided over reality, a suspended jewel of crystalline architecture hanging in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant that shimmered with the color of bruised violets and crushed velvet. Inside, the air was not merely oxygen and nitrogen, but a curated blend of psychoreactive spores and perfumed heavy gases that kept the physiological states of the delegates in a perpetual hum of submissive euphoria. Light did not fall here. It was woven, threading through the translucent walls in ribbons of gold and iridescent pearl, casting no shadows. For in the doctrine of the Ethelgard, darkness was a flaw of the primitive mind, a failure of imagination that had been engineered out of existence millennia ago. High Archon Xylthos sat upon a throne carved from a single piece of singing diamond, his elongated, fluid limbs draped in fabrics that defied gravity, floating around him like the petals of a bioluminescent flower underwater. He was beautiful in the way a storm or a supernova is beautiful, terrible, perfect, and utterly removed from the grime of biological necessity. Below him, in the tiered rings of the debating floor, the representatives of 1,000 subservient species knelt or hovered, their heads bowed not in fear, but in the crushing weight of awe that the Ethelgard projected as naturally as a star projects heat. They were the makers, the architects, the divine ancestors who had stepped out of the primordial soup of the galaxy to bring order to chaos, to pave the chaotic void with geometry and light. Or so the scriptures etched into the very atoms of the Synod's walls claimed. But today, the perfection was marred by a vibration, a low-frequency dissonance that the psychoreactive air could not scrub away. It was the sound of hesitation. Xylthos felt the tremor in his primary sensory fronds, a ripple of distaste that tasted like copper on his tongue. He looked down at the circular projection pool in the center of the room, where a holographic representation of the galactic arm swirled in obedient silence. A sector near the necrotic rim, a place of dust and dead stars, was pulsing with an ugly, crimson light. It was a stain on his map. A report had arrived moments ago, carried by a courier vessel that had burned its engines to slag to deliver the message, a message that should have been impossible. A new species had been encountered. This in itself was not rare. The galaxy was teeming with vermin that crawled out of the mud, discovered fire, and promptly worshipped the Ethelgard as soon as the first golden fleet appeared in their skies. Submission was the natural order of the cosmos. Evolution was a ladder, and the Ethelgard sat at the top, kicking away the rungs beneath them. But this species, they had not bowed. They had not wept with joy at the sight of the divine cruisers. They had not opened their planetary networks to the benevolent overriding code of the High Synod. Instead, they had hailed the Golden Fleet on an open, unencrypted analog frequency, a barbaric scream of radio waves that rattled the delicate sensors of the Ethelgard ships, and asked, with a terrifying lack of preamble, what the architects' intentions were. Intentions, as if a god needs to explain the lightning to the tree it strikes. The arrogance was so profound, so alien, that the council had sat in stunned silence for 3 standard cycles. "Speak," Xylthos commanded, his voice not a sound but a resonance that vibrated in the skeletal structures of everyone present. The courier, a trembling creature of the crawl species, chitinous, four-armed, bred for war but broken for obedience, pressed its forehead against the cool floor. The crawl were the muscle of the empire, vast and brutish, yet this one looked small, diminished by what it had seen. "High Archon," the crawl rasped, its voice clicking with the involuntary spasms of terror. "We approached the anomaly as instructed. We projected the anthem of glory. We displayed the holograms of the ascendant path. Usually the primitives prostrate themselves within microcycles, but the anomaly did not respond to the beauty. It did not respond to the psychic pressure." The creature paused, its carapace shivering. "It scanned us, it scanned the Golden Fleet, and then it blocked our path." A collective gasp, like the sound of wind rushing through a canyon, swept through the chamber. To block a Golden Fleet was heresy. It was physics defying theology. "Describe the vessel," Xylthos ordered, his internal bioluminescence shifting from a calm blue to a heated, angry violet. He needed to understand the aesthetic of this enemy. Were they jagged rocks? Were they slime-covered biologicals? The nature of the ugliness would dictate the nature of the cleansing. The crawl courier hesitated, struggling to find the words in the high tongue of the court. "It is dense, Archon. It is not grown. It is not woven from light. It is forged. It is a block of dead matter. Iron, titanium, carbon. It absorbs the light of the stars around it. It has no elegance. It is a scar on the void. They call it the UNS Iconoclast." The name hung in the perfumed air like a foul odor. Zalthos narrowed his eyes. A ship named for the breaking of images. A ship made of dead metal. It sounded primitive, heavy, anchored to the crude laws of Newtonian physics that the Ethelgard had long ago transcended through their mastery of zero-point manipulation. Why then was there a cold knot of dread tightening in his secondary heart? He looked at the other archons, beings of similar ethereal grace, and saw the same flicker of uncertainty behind their golden masks. They had ruled for 10,000 years unchallenged, not by war, but by the sheer, overwhelming evidence of their superiority. They claimed to be gods, and their technology was so advanced, so seamless, so beautiful that no one had ever thought to test the claim. Until now. If it is metal, Zalthos said, regaining his composure, smoothing the silk of his voice, then it can be crushed. Metal creates friction. Friction creates heat. Heat leads to entropy. Dispatch the 7th Seraphim wing. Do not destroy them immediately. Tow this iconoclast here. I wish to see the creatures that dare to bring iron into the House of Light. We will dismantle their ugly ship piece by piece, and we will build a monument to their folly. The order was given, and the machinery of the Empire began to turn, but it turned slowly, encumbered by its own ritual. The Ethelgard did not simply mobilize, they choreographed. The 7th Seraphim wing, a collection of vessels that looked more like cathedral spires and stained glass artwork than warships, began the long, graceful burn toward the rim. But in the deep silence of space, far from the perfumed halls of the Synod, the universe was not waiting for choreography. The UNS Iconoclast was not waiting. It was a vessel born of a different philosophy, a philosophy forged in the fires of a world that had almost killed its children a dozen times over. Earth, a word the aliens did not yet know, but one that would soon be burned into their history banks. While the aliens debated the aesthetics of war, the humans were calculating firing solutions. The distance between the two ideologies was about to be bridged by high-velocity railgun rounds, and a species that had long ago decided that gods were just things that hadn't bled yet. POV shifted to the bridge of the Iconoclast, and the atmosphere was a stark, brutal contrast to the Ethelgard's palace. There was no perfume here, only the smell of recycled ozone, stale coffee, and the sharp tang of cooling hydraulic fluid. The lighting was low, red-shifted to preserve night vision, practical and harsh. The walls were bulkhead gray, adorned not with art but with conduit piping, emergency seal handles, and scuff marks from magnetic boots. Admiral Sarah Halloway sat in the command chair, a throne of worn leather and shock-absorbing gel. She was not ethereal. She was 60 years of hard gravity with gray hair cropped short and a face mapped with the lines of difficult decisions. She watched the main tactical display where the Golden Fleet was approaching. To her eyes, they looked like ornaments, fragile, ostentatious. "They're hailing us again, Admiral," the comms officer, Lieutenant Chen, reported. His voice was clipped professional. Audio only. Translators are picking up. Poetry? Something about the cleaning fire of the celestial harmonic. Halloway rubbed her temples. "Put it on screen, but filter out the strobe effects. I don't want a seizure, I want a negotiation or a target profile." The screen flickered, revealing the visage of a lower archon, a creature of pale light and flowing robes. "Primitive voyagers," the alien intoned, its voice layered with synthesized harmonics meant to induce awe. "You trespass in the garden of the architects. Power down your reactor core. Jettison your weapons. Prepare for the right of submission. Resistance is a dissonance we will correct." Halloway didn't blink. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, looking small in the frame of the giant screen but radiating a density of presence that the alien seemed to recoil from. "This is Admiral Halloway of the United Nations Space Command Vessel Iconoclast. We are exploring neutral space. We have detected no borders, no beacons, and no claim markers that comply with galactic standard protocols. We are not turning off our reactor. We are not jettisoning our weapons. If you fire on us, we will return fire, and we don't miss." The simplicity of the statement seemed to confuse the alien. It paused, likely consulting with a superior or an algorithm. "You speak of protocols. We are the law. We are the light. Your ship is hideous. It offends the void." Halloway cracked a dry, humorless smile. "We didn't build it to look good. We built it to work. Now are we done with the art CR? Etique, we're picking up massive energy spikes from your lead vessels. I'm telling you now, that's a mistake." The connection was cut abruptly. On the bridge of the Iconoclast, the red alert klaxons didn't wail. They gave a single, sharp chirp, and the crew moved with practicing fluidity. There was no panic, no awe. Humans had met gods before in their own history books, kings who claimed divine right, emperors who demanded worship, and they had learned that every god falls when you cut the hamstrings. "They're locking on," Tactical Officer Vance said, his fingers flying across his console. Thermal signatures increasing. They're using some kind of plasma-lasing hybrid. It's pretty, but the dispersion rate is terrible at this range. Holloway nodded. Let them take the first shot. We need the telemetry to confirm their shield frequencies. Hold position. Brace for impact. The first shot from the Ethelgard ship was a lance of pure, golden light. It traversed the vacuum in an instant, striking the forward deflector screens of the iconoclast. To the aliens, this weapon was the Ray of Judgment, designed to slice through the hulls of lesser species like a hot knife through wax. It hit the human ship's shields, layered fields of gravimetric distortion and particle barriers, and shattered. The light bloomed across the iconoclast's nose, dissipating in a harmless shower of sparks and radiation. The ship shuddered, the deck plates groaning, but the hull held. Inside the Ethelgard command ship, panic began to set in. The judgment had failed. The ugly ship was still there. Not only was it there, but it was moving. It wasn't moving with the grace of a gravity drive. It was moving with the brutal Newtonian thrust of main fusion torches. The iconoclast pivoted, its rear engines flaring blue-white, a color of intense, focused heat that dwarfed the golden glow of the alien fleet. Shields holding at 82%, Vance reported. Their weapon is high-yield but inefficient. They're wasting terawatts on light show theatrics. Holloway nodded. Return fire, main railgun batteries. Target their lead ship's propulsion. Don't kill them, just unmask them. The iconoclast shuddered as the magnetic accelerator cannons fired. There was no sound in space, but the recoil vibrated through the bones of every crew member. 3 tungsten carbide slugs, each the size of a small car, exited the barrels at a significant fraction of the speed of light. They did not glow. They did not sing. They were invisible kinetic death. They crossed the distance in a heartbeat. The Ethelgard shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and plasma, were wholly unprepared for the sheer brute force of kinetic impact. The gods had forgotten that force equals mass times acceleration. The slugs punched through the golden energy fields as if they were mist. They slammed into the ornate, crystalline prow of the lead Seraphim cruiser. There was no explosion of fire, for there was no oxygen, but there was a violent shattering. The beautiful, sweeping lines of the alien ship buckled. The crystal fractured. The golden light flickered and died, revealing the machinery underneath, dull, gray, utilitarian machinery that had been hidden by the holographic glamour. The gods were flying in metal cans just like everyone else. They just painted theirs better. Silence descended on the sensor grid. The Ethelgard fleet froze. Their flagship was drifting, venting atmosphere, its divine glow extinguished, leaving it looking like a broken toy. Holloway keyed the comms. This is the iconoclast. That was a warning. We can put the next one through your bridge, or we can talk. The response took longer this time. When the channel opened, it was not the haughty Archon from before, but a terrified sub-commander, his mask askew. What are you?" he whispered. Holloway leaned back. "We're humans, and we'd like to see your manager." The journey to the Ethelgard homeworld was tense. The iconoclast was escorted not as a prisoner, but as a dangerous, volatile guest. The Seraphim wing kept their distance, their sensors locked on the human vessel with a mixture of fear and insatiable curiosity. Inside the human ship, the mood was somber. Holloway knew that winning a skirmish was not winning a war. They had embarrassed a galactic empire, and pride was a dangerous thing to wound. She spent the travel time in the briefing room with her senior staff and the diplomatic envoy, Dr. Eris Thorne. Thorne was a xenopsychologist, a man who had spent his life studying the fractured mindsets of first contact scenarios. He looked at the data they had gathered from the Ethelgard ship. "It's a masquerade," Thorne said, pointing to the schematics. "Look at this. Their energy output is massive, but 40% of it is dedicated to aesthetics. Hard light projections, atmospheric shimmering, acoustic dampening to make their engines run silent. They are crippling their own efficiency to maint. And the illusion of godhood. It's psychological warfare," Holloway mused. "If you look untouchable, no one touches you." "Exactly," Thorne replied. "They've conquered 1,000 worlds without firing a shot, just by showing up and glowing. We're the first ones to throw a rock at the stained glass window. The problem is, now that the window is broken, what do we do with the people inside? If we humiliate them too deeply, they might suicide burn their entire civilization just to spite us. Or worse, the subject species might riot, creating a power vacuum that kills billions." Holloway looked at the star chart. "We tread lightly, we walk in, we prove we're equals, and we try to get them to the table without shattering their entire society. But I have a feeling they aren't going to make it easy." They arrived at the capital system, and even Holloway had to admit it was breathtaking. The gas giant was ringed by orbital habitats that looked like spun sugar, connected by filaments of light. The High Synod Station, the celestial spire, floated like a crown jewel. As the iconoclast docked, the contrast was painful. The human ship was a scarred brick in a jewelry box. The airlock cycled, and the boarding party assembled. Holloway, Thorne, and a squad of Marines in powered armor. The armor was bulky, green, and industrial. No capes, no glowing runes, just ceramic plates and heavy rifles. When the airlock opened, they were hit by the wall of perfumed air. A delegation of Ethelgard awaited them, led by High Archon Zalthos himself. He towered over the humans, shimmering, his presence designed to trigger the biological awe response in lesser species. Thorne checked his biomonitor, his heart rate was up. "Steady," he murmured over the team comms. "They're broadcasting a subsonic frequency. It induces anxiety and submission. Filter it out." The Marines' helmets adjusted, and the artificial fear vanished, replaced by the calm clarity of the HUD. Zalthos looked down at the small, soft creatures encased in their crude metal shells. He was terrified, though he would never show it. The report from the border had shaken the Synod to its core, a ship that ignored the light, beings that spoke with the flatness of stone. "You have been permitted to enter the sanctum," Zalthos said, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You have broken the peace of the garden. You have scarred a seraphim. Why do you bring violence to the realm of the architects?" Holloway stepped forward. She didn't bow, she didn't kneel. She engaged the external speakers on her suit to cut through the atmospheric dampening. "We didn't bring violence, we brought reality. You fired first, we just finished it." She gestured to the grand hall around them. "This is a nice place, but we know how the lights work, Archon. We know about the hard light emitters. We know about the psionic dampening fields. You put on a good show, but we're not here for the show." A ripple of shock went through the assembled court. The subservient species, the crawl, the slender vari, the aquatic ula, watched with wide eyes. No one spoke to the Archons like this. It was blasphemy. Zalthos stepped closer, his bioluminescence flaring red. "You are arrogant little creature. You think because you have a rock that flies, you understand the universe. We have guided evolution for 10,000 cycles. We have held back the darkness." "Have you?" Holloway challenged. "Or have you just blinded everyone so they can't see the darkness? We've analyzed your empire's energy consumption. You're stagnant. You haven't invented a new technology in 3,000 years. You're burning out your stars to power your vanity projects." This was the gamble. The human intelligence AI had analyzed the Ethelgard transmission logs and found anomalies, massive energy drains masked as spiritual convergence that were actually just inefficient infrastructure maintenance. The gods were running out of batteries. Zalthos froze. The truth was a dagger. The Ethelgard were indeed dying slowly. Their obsession with perfection had halted their innovation. They were trapped in their own golden cage, maintaining the illusion of omnipotence while their infrastructure decayed. "Silence!" Zalthos roared, and for the first time he used the voice, a focused psionic blast meant to shatter the mind of the insolent. It slammed into Holloway. It was like a physical blow, a spike of ice driven into her frontal lobe. He staggered, one knee hitting the floor. The Marines raised their rifles, the whine of capacitors charging filling the silence. "Hold!" Holloway gritted out, blood trickling from her nose. She fought the intrusion. Human minds were messy, chaotic, hardened by centuries of internal conflict and contradictory philosophies. They were not the smooth, blank slates of the genetically pacified servant races. Zalthos found his psychic probe caught in a web of stubbornness, trauma, and iron will. He pushed hard. Human mind pushed back. It wasn't a wall, it was a swamp. He couldn't break it because there was nothing singular to break. Holloway stood up. It was a slow, painful movement, the servos in her armor whining. She wiped the blood from her face. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice shaking but loud. "Is that your divinity, a cheap parlor trick, a mind spike?" She looked around at the thousands of watching aliens. "They aren't gods," she shouted, her voice amplified by her suit's speakers echoing through the crystalline spires. "They're just people, scared old people hiding behind a curtain." She looked at Zalthos. "And you're afraid." "You're not afraid of us, you're afraid of what's coming. We saw the data on your flagship. You're tracking something on the edge of the galaxy, something you can't stop with light shows." The tension in the room broke. The illusion wavered. Zalthos looked at Holloway, and for a moment the golden mask slipped. His posture slumped. The bioluminescence faded to a dull, weary gray. He looked ancient. You saw the shadow," he whispered. The admission was soft, but in the silence of the chamber it was a thunderclap. The other Archons murmured in panic. The secret was out. The servant races looked at each other, the seeds of doubt sprouting into forests of realization. Holloway nodded, her aggression fading into a grim seriousness. "We saw the signal patterns, a void wake. Something massive is moving through the dark sector, something that eats stars." She stepped closer, removing her helmet. The air smelled overly sweet, cloying, but she breathed it in. "You've been building this Disneyland. to hide the fact that you can't fight it. You've been pacifying the galaxy because you think if everyone is quiet, the monster won't hear you. Xalthos sank onto his throne. The devouring silence, he murmured. It comes every eon. We thought if we created a realm of pure order, pure light, we could repel it. But our weapons, they are art, not war. We have forgotten how to bleed. He looked at the human, this small, ugly creature of water and carbon who carried a weapon that threw rocks. And you? You think you can fight it? Holloway signaled to Thorn, who projected a holographic tactical map into the center of the room, overriding the Ethelguard's swirling galaxies. The human map was red, jagged, full of vectors and firing solutions. We don't think, Holloway said. We know. Humanity was born in the dirt. We fought for every inch of our existence. We don't care about perfection. We care about survival. She pointed to the iconoclast docked outside. That ship isn't pretty because we didn't have time to paint it. We were too busy armoring the hull. You have the resources, you have the fleets, but you lack the will. We have the will. The alliance was not formed with signatures on parchment, but with the unlocking of codes. The Ethelguard, shamed and exposed, stripped away the illusions. The hard light projectors were turned off. The golden facades of their ships were deactivated, revealing the gray hulls beneath. It was a shock to the galaxy. The gods were suddenly mortal. There was panic, riots in some sectors, but the presence of the humans, calm, logical, and visibly armed, acted as a stabilizing anchor. The Crawl, seeing that the Ethelguard were physically weaker than them, almost revolted, but Holloway intervened. She stood before the Crawl Warmaster, Virik, and offered a hand. Don't kill them, she said. We need their engines, they need your strength, and we all need to survive what's coming. It was a difficult diplomacy, mediated by the humans who walked the line between the fallen gods and the angry servants. Months passed. The Shadow arrived. It was not a fleet, but a swarm, a hive mind of biological constructs that consumed energy, a flood of darkness that blotted out stars. They hit the outer colonies first. In the past, the Ethelguard would have sent ships to shine lights at them, and they would have been eaten. This time, the fleet that met them was different. It was a mongrel fleet. Ethelguard cruisers, stripped of their gold and fitted with human railguns. Crawl boarding torpedoes, guided by Ethelguard sensors. And at the center, the UNS Iconoclast and her sister ships, the new human fleet that had poured out of the warp gates. The battle was not elegant. It was chaotic, dirty, and loud across the electromagnetic spectrum. The swarm adapted, but the humans were unpredictable. When the swarm jammed their sensors, the humans fired blindly using visual targeting. When the swarm boarded ships, the Crawl fought them claw for claw in the corridors. When the Ethelguard morale broke, the human comms officers broadcasted not prayers but orders. Hold the line, flank left, pour fire into that breach. The voice of Holloway, now Supreme Commander of the Allied Defense, cut through the panic. The Ethelguard saw something they had never understood, the beauty of Strug. Glee, there was an aesthetic in the ugly, grinding resistance of the humans. It was the aesthetic of life refusing to die. In the final engagement, the swarm attempted to consume the Ethelguard home star. The Dyson swarms of the enemy began to wrap around the sun. Xalthos, watching from the Iconoclast's bridge, despaired. It is over, he said. They will darken the light. Holloway looked at him, her face grimy, a bandage around her head. No, she said, we're going to pulse the star. It was an insane plan, theoretical physics that the Ethelguard had banned as heretical. The humans planned to fire a spread of gravimetric detonators into the sun's corona, causing a coronal mass ejection of apocalyptic proportions, directed at the swarm. It will burn the atmosphere of your high synod, Holloway warned. You'll lose the palace, you'll lose the crystals, it'll all melt. Xalthos looked at the screen. He looked at the fleet of ugly ships dying to protect his people. He looked at the Crawl fighting side by side with his seraphim. He realized that the Golden Age had been a coffin. Burn it, Xalthos whispered, then louder. Burn it all. If we live, we can build again. The Iconoclast fired. The sun vomited a spear of plasma and radiation that washed over the swarm. The biological ships screamed silently as they boiled. The shockwave hit the High Synod station. The delicate spires melted. The diamond throne dissolved. The illusion of the eternal paradise was washed away in a torrent of fire. But the planet below survived. The fleet survived. The swarm was broken, its biomass scattered into the void. In the aftermath, the galaxy was a different place. The Ethelguard were no longer gods. They were refugees housed in temporary shelters built by human engineers. The hierarchy of the galaxy had been flattened. There were no more masters, only survivors. Xalthos stood with Holloway on the surface of the homeworld, looking at the ruin of the orbital station raining down as shooting stars. The air was no longer perfumed. It smelled of ash and ozone. "It is ugly," Xalthos said, picking up a handful of dirt. "Yes," Holloway replied, watching the sunset. "But it's real, and tomorrow we start building, not with light but with steel." The human admiral looked up at the stars, now clear of the golden filter. The gods had fallen, but in their place something stronger had risen. A brotherhood of the broken, bound by the knowledge that the universe was dark and full of terrors, and that the only light that mattered was the one you made yourself, sparks flying from the anvil of resistance. The illusion was gone. The work had begun. And the humans, with their scarred ships and their stubborn hearts, were ready to lead the way, not as gods, but as the engineers of a new, defiant dawn. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Beauty is fragile. Iron is forever. And the most dangerous thing in the void isn't a god, it's a human who has decided that you are in the way. The peace that followed was not the silent, drugged peace of the Ethelgard. It was a noisy peace. It was the sound of Krall construction crews arguing with Ethelgard architects about load-bearing walls. It was the sound of human diplomats debating trade tariffs with aquatic ULO representatives. It was messy, contentious, and vibrant. The iconoclast was retired, docked permanently as a museum and a warning. Xalthos, no longer an archon but a councilman, would often visit it. He would walk the gray, scuffed corridors and touch the cold metal walls. He finally understood the human philosophy. The ship was beautiful, not because of how it looked, but because of what it had survived. He realized that the Ethelgard had spent eons trying to be above the universe, while the humans had embraced being part of it. The twist was not that the gods were fake. The twist was that divinity was a trap. The true power lay in the ability to change, to break, and to heal crooked. Deep in the dark space, beyond the rim, the remnants of the swarm recoiled. They had tasted the Ethelgard before, soft, sweet energy. But this time they had bitten into something hard. They had broken their teeth on the shield of humanity. The signal went out to the greater hive: do not approach. The prey has evolved. The prey has teeth. And on Earth, and on the Ethelgard homeworld, and on 1,000 worlds in between, the sentient races looked up at the night sky not with reverence, but with vigilance. They knew the monsters were out there. But they also knew that the gods were dead, and the giants walked among them, carrying railguns and offering handshakes. And that was enough. The grand narrative of the galaxy had shifted from a hymn to a roar. The beautiful illusion was unmasked, revealing a chaotic, dangerous, and infinite potential. The humans had not just broken the ship, they had broken the stagnation of history. As Holloway once said to a young Ethelgard student who asked about the nature, "Human power, we don't claim to be gods, we're just the ones who show up when the gods run away." And in the end, that was the only religion the galaxy needed. And